Now let's do some practice problems with using the chain rule. And here I have three different functions, and we're trying to find the derivatives. This third function is kind of a challenge problem, so you guys can pause the video and try these out, and then I'll go over the answers. But remember that the chain rule says that the derivative of a function of another function is the derivative of the outer function with respect to the inner function times the derivative of the inner function. So let's see how that looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that this x squared is our variable. And I'm going to take the derivative of cosine with respect to our variable. So we know what the derivative of cosine is. It's negative sine of our variable. And now that we did the outer function, now we're going to look at this inner function. So we're going to ignore the cosine x, and we're going to take the derivative of x squared with respect to x. So the derivative of x squared is 2x. So that's how you use the chain rule. Now let's go to the second function. We have e to the x squared. So our first function is e to the x, and our second function is x squared, or e to some variable. So the derivative of e to some variable is e to that same variable. And we're going to multiply that by the derivative of x squared. The derivative of x squared is 2x. So those were two simple problems. Now let's look at a bit of a more complicated problem where there's a lot more to think about. So we have negative cosine of sine of e to the x cubed. So I really think you guys should try this one on your own before I work it out. But if you guys are ready, I'm going to go over this right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this first function, which is cosine of, we're just going to think of this as some variable, negative cosine of some variable. So the derivative of negative cosine is sine. So that's going to be sine of that variable. So in these chain rule problems, when you're taking the derivative of the outer function, you don't change the variable. I mean, nothing's going to happen inside of here yet. We're taking the derivative of the outside function with respect to this inside variable, and then we're going to multiply it by whatever this inside variable gives us. So now that we got rid of the cosine, we're left with sine of e to the x cubed. So now we're going to think of this as, just another normal chain rule problem. So sine of e to the x cubed. So our outer function is sine of some variable. So we're really ignoring this variable. So the derivative of sine of something is equal to cosine of that thing. And now that we got rid of the cosine and sine, now we're looking at e to the x cubed. And e to the x cubed, that's very similar to e to the x squared. Our original function is e to the something, and the derivative of e to the something is just e to that same thing. And now we just have to take the derivative of x cubed, which is 3x squared. And that's how you take the derivative of this whole expression. The way I learned it and which made it a lot easier for me to understand, is I would think of this as, okay, this is cosine of something. I just called it thing. And I know that's probably not good math vocabulary, but I called it cosine of something. So the derivative of cosine of something, that's just negative sine of that same thing. And all I have to do now is multiply it by the derivative of that thing. So maybe that helps you, maybe that doesn't. But just remember, nothing really happens to this x squared when we're taking the derivative of cosine. We're just multiplying it by the derivative. And that's a chain rule. And you really want to make sure you have a good grip on this, because it's going to help you a lot.